All right. Everybody see the presentation?
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Brendan Austin. I'm the Director of Financial Performance Management. I've been working with Tm1 and Planning Analytics for about 20 years now. Been with LPA for the last 10, working with different companies. Before that, I was an IBM customer and actually implemented and managed the Tm1 environment, Planning Analytics environment in industry. Today, I want to talk to you about some exciting changes that are coming out for Planning Analytics. We've been waiting now for a while for some big changes to come out. Now that we've kind of gotten a preview, we know why we've been waiting so long because they are pretty substantial. We're going to go through those. We're also going to go through the ones that have already been released that are available today. And then at the end, I'm going to go over a case study for a customer that we're working with right now, where we built a model where they can do demand planning, forecasting, and get a profitability model down to the SKU and ship to customer level, and talk about the success that we've had out there. So starting off with what is available now. So as of Planning Analytics 2092, the Tm1 web installation, and this is for on-premise clients, the Tm1 web installation is no longer included in the base release. So when you would reinstall 2092 on-premise, it would not include the Tm1 web product. It's now a separate download. It's called IBM Planning Analytics Spreadsheet Services Installer. Works the same as it did before. It's now a separate install. I believe the vision is that over time that Tm1 web will be deprecated over the next several releases, but for now it's a separate installation. Also in PA 209, you have the ability to do dynamic shapes and images. So you can add those shapes and images to reports. And as the value associated with those images and shapes changes, gets bigger or smaller, the images and shapes will change along with them. You can also assign logos, pictures, flags, product images, etc., to different data points in your data set as well, which is kind of cool. Also, what's released now is web sheets. Now, when you publish them in your application folder, to be available to either Planning Analytics Workspace and or Tm1 Web. It now saves that worksheet on the tab that was active when you uploaded it. So the first time that somebody opens that, it will open it up on the exact same tab that was active when it was saved. So that's different than it was before. You used to have to kind of rearrange those tabs or be real careful about how you were uploading that. Now it will start with the active tab that it was saved in. The other big thing is the Tm1 Operations Console has been deprecated. So for the on-premise customers that were using Tm1 Operations Console, starting with 209, that is no longer available. You now have to use the Planning Analytics Workspace Administration front end to monitor databases, start the servers, et cetera, and see the threads that are running. The big thing of this presentation is what's coming. So these changes are huge. They're coming in the fourth quarter. The tentative release date is scheduled for October 15th. So what I'm going to be showing you today is still in the final stages of development. We don't have a live environment to show you today, but I've got some screenshots and we're going to talk through a lot of these changes. We're hoping that all of these things will get released in the October 15th release, but just the disclaimer that that may change before October 15th. Something may not actually get released. There are four major pillars of changes that are coming out in this next release. The first one is the welcome and navigation part of Planning Analytics Workspace. It's really a complete rewrite of Planning Analytics Workspace, and the whole experience is more like the Cognos Analytics front end. And you'll notice as we go through this, you'll see a lot of the similarities to what Rich was showing you in his presentation. The next pillar is plans and applications. This is including a new workflow engine, which has been missing from planning analytics for a few years now. The old contributor interface was kind of working behind the scenes, but was kind of clunky and old. It's been completely rewritten in Planning Analytics Workspace, and we're going to go through that today. Probably the biggest change of all is the addition of AI forecasting into Planning Analytics. This is built into the model. So it's going to, there's no additional programming that you need to do. There's no software that you need to purchase. It's a built-in AI forecasting module that you can simply pick which part of your plan you want it to automatically forecast, and it will do that. And we'll go have a section on that. And then finally, the dashboarding and charting. This is more around Planning Analytics Workspace again. Just kind of taking it to the next level, making it a whole lot easier to create feature-rich reports. Looks and feels a lot like Cognos Analytics, and some of that flexibility that you get with Cognos Analytics you can now get on the PAW side as well. So starting off with PAW, before we get started here, so this is the new PAW layout, okay? Looks very different than the old PAW layout and the way it's user interface with it. This will not get turned on automatically. So for your cloud customers, on October 15th, this won't just be out there. The administrator has to go out there and choose when that switch happens. And it's called the experience, whether you want the classic experience or the new experience. So they'll give customers time to test the new layout, the new functionality of PAW before forcing you to go to the new layout. For you on-premise customers, you would need to obviously install the new version that's going to come out on October 15th, and it would look like this straight out of the box. Okay? But basically, it's a new unified experience. Like I said before, it looks like the centralized platform that they're trying to come up with. The Cognos Analytics and Planning Analytics will both sit on top of. The content can now be organized and really easily. You can actually add pictures to books. So you'll notice you can actually add, get a plane on your sample application 1 thing. You can also track favorites and recently used items to come back to. And you can now display images on those books, as mentioned before. So the navigation and welcome page, the welcome banner up at the top, just like in Cognos Analytics, you can turn that on or off. You can also customize that. Then you've got some quick launch areas down below where you get to the areas within Planning Analytics Workspace. So if you go to Applications and Plans, you see your workflow models that you put out there. Reports and Analysis is where your dashboards, your data and models, those are the back-end cubes, dimensions, etc. And then the administration window, which would only be shown for database administrators. Workflow. So a lot of people have been asking about workflow for years. Planning Analytics Contributor has been around for a number of years, and it was solely based on a organizational hierarchy. And that didn't really marry with a lot of business that's out there now. People needed it to be more flexible than it is. And so what we found is a lot of times, even though somebody may start off with contributor, they may leave that pretty quickly just because it was too rigid. The new contributor model is completely up to the administrator to set that up. It's no longer driven off of a single dimension in the cube. And it was the old model was very security heavy. So you had to set up a lot of security groups, et cetera, on the back end. And then each time somebody went into a node to take ownership of something, it changed a lot of the security model behind the scenes. That is no longer the case. So this is a screenshot of what the new the new workflow engine looks like. So up at the top, we've got our total plan. Then we've got the sprints down as the rows. So in this one, we've got 3 sprints: verify historicals, enter revenue, and enter projected balances. The administrator can open and close these sprints individually. You no longer have to, it's not, a one-stop shop, everything's open or everything's closed. They can have different timelines associated with each sprint. And then within the sprint, you've got the items or the templates or workbooks that are associated with that sprint that users will see when they actually log into the front end. There's a due date associated with each sprint. You can specify whether that sprint actually requires a submission by the users or if it's just out there for information. And then as the sprint starts, you actually see the progress as far as a percentage. So the administrator can come in here and see who has actually started or submitted that sprint as well, and can make the changes very easily right on the screen. You also have the ability at the bottom to type an announcement. And that announcement can either be within the application itself, or it can actually send out an email now, which is a big change. So just kind of overall, the new workflow, you can add views, PAW books, or worksheets into these planning sprints. So if you've got existing workbooks that you've already created, you can actually drag those into your planning sprint. Your planning sprints can be opened and closed individually. Each section can have a different deadline and submission requirement. Progress is measured for each. And the big thing is the email messaging integration point. You no longer have to create a custom program behind the scenes to send an automated email when something needs attention or is approved or rejected. It's now built into the email system. Here's a screenshot of some of the setup information. There's a new date picker that's now available in Planning Analytics. So this is completely new technology for us on this side, where you actually have a calendar to pick from. You can fast forward and go backwards and pick dates, and it will actually record those dates in the back end. And then again, you've got your announcement area where it would send out emails or an announcement when users log in. The built-in email notification, you can optionally notify all the groups associated with the plan or specific groups. And this is actually the email format that would come out from the server itself. It automatically email all the users that were set up as users on the workflow. Another example of when the plan participants actually log in, what they would see from an end user perspective. So on the left-hand side, it's kind of the overview of the entire plan. The different sprints, within each sprint, the pieces that they actually can look in. So right now we're in Verify Actuals and we're looking at the income statement. When they select income statement on the right-hand side, that form actually comes up. It is read-write. They can submit directly from the screen or go to a different tab, etc. They still have the same commentary functionality that you had before with the old contributor interface, but it's a whole new look and feel of how the users interact with that plan. So this is the new navigation screen for Planning Analytics Workspace. So right now, the old version, you had basically tabs off to the left, and then you had books kind of in the middle of the screen. And basically, the only way to really organize things was to alphabetize them. You could create folders for books, but it was kind of clunky, and it was really hard to find things, especially move things around. You now have this list view, which will list everything, and you can sort things by, modified date, what type of asset it is, what the name is. There's a search button, so you can search for content within that application, etc. So it's a lot easier to kind of navigate and find the content you really want to interact with. You also have the ability over on the right-hand side to click the heart button, which indicates that that's one of your favorites, and we'll actually copy that content into your favorite section. So if you've got certain reports that you're always going to, you can kind of shortcut to that directly in your favorites area. Here's an example of the built-in filters. It will not only just filter the name of the report or name of the dashboard, et cetera, but as well as the content. So if I've got something that's displaying revenue, I can type in revenue and it'll bring up all the reports that are going to show revenue in them, et cetera. So some of the display options have been completely rewritten as well. Again, this is starting to look more and more like Cognos Analytics as far as the navigation, the being able to snap things on a page, line them up automatically. If you've ever created Planning Analytics Workspace dashboards in the past, they were very clunky, very hard to kind of navigate and get things looking correct on the screen. These display options actually help you to get that done a lot quicker than you could before, and laws error. So some of the new formatting options that are available, you have new alignment and positioning tools for each object. So you can left justify, center them, top justify, etc. You can specify a position with an X and Y axis. You can resize things automatically. You can rotate things. You can also optimize the screen size, ratio, and zoom, which is huge for deploying to mobile devices. So Planning Analytics Workspace in the past was, you just created it and you really didn't have any choice on how it was displayed on the screen. If it was zoomed in, it was zoomed out, etc. And you had to sometimes if you were doing Excel spreadsheets embedded in there, you'd have to zoom in on your Excel spreadsheet, then publish it that way. And sometimes it didn't look right on the screen. Now you have that ability to actually change that in Workspace itself when you're actually creating your visualizations. So some of the other formatting options off on the right, you can actually specify the screen type, whether it's letter, legal, 16:9, 4:3, again, for optimizing for mobile, etc. Specify the grid, etc. And we're going to go over some of these other at the bottom here in a second. Another big change to Planning Analytics Workspace is the addition of a custom color palette. So before, you only had about 10 colors to pick from, and I think there were 4 or 5 defined color palettes to choose from. You now have, I believe it's 20 to choose from out of the box, and then you can create your own custom color palette as well. And you actually have the color wheel. You can actually create your own colors on there. You can name them and apply those palettes across multiple books or the entire system if you want to. Another big change is the charting formatting options. A big pain with the existing Planning Analytics Workspace reporting engine is when you create a visualization, the axes on the charts were not customizable at all. So it kind of scaled things to how it thought the data should be scaled. And a lot of times it just didn't make any sense. And you didn't have any way to change that other than just changing the view of what you were looking at and trying to look at exactly something else. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense. You now have the ability to change where the axis starts. So the minimum value, the maximum value. So you can change the scaling of that report completely. You can also change where the axis is displayed on the screen. And then you can actually put data points on the axis, on the chart itself now too, as well as adjusting the colors on the chart itself as well. You can also do font size, font family, etc. All of which you had no ability to change in the existing Planning Analytics Workspace engine. So my accounting people out there have always asked about, can I do a waterfall chart? And the answer has always been in Workspace, no, because the waterfall charts have not existed until today with this 10.15 release. So we now have the waterfall chart, a box plot, and then a multi-line column chart that's available. You now can also assign data to bars and sections, and you can show data directly on the chart, like I mentioned before. This is the new chart editor. So again, looks similar to what Rich was showing, Cognos Analytics, where you've got the drop zones for the dimensions. So you could drag and drop and it'll start creating that chart automatically. You've also got the filters down here, but a lot more control over those visualizations than we had before in Planning Analytics Workspace. The axis lines, again, you can change the axis scale, specify the minimum and maximum values, and change the color palette and fonts on those axis lines. Okay, so this is kind of the big reveal here. So I don't know about you, but when I would be doing a forecast in business, somebody would ask me, what does next year look like? And sometimes a lot of times it was like you had to go look at your crystal ball because you'd have no idea. You had last year's data to look at. You may have some assumptions that may change. You may have some drivers that may impact next year's forecast or budget, but sometimes it was just gut feel, right? And there was nothing really built in planning analytics that would do any type of statistical modeling on its own without, reaching out to like SPSS and then sending the data out and then bringing it back in and having Tm1 predict any model within the tool itself. So this release actually has an AR component actually built into it. So it will actually help you derive what that future forecast or budget may look like. So why AI? Liz is going to be talking about this later this afternoon, but within planning analytics and from an accounting and finance perspective, it's better accuracy. So if we have a statistical model, we can base that on the historical data, and we can run it through all the different scenarios and come up with a calculated prediction of what the forecasted periods look like. Consistency, if you've got a statistical model behind the scenes that's calculating this forecast, it's always going to come up with the same answer, whether I run it or somebody down the hall runs it. It's not my gut feel versus somebody else's gut feel. And then timeliness. These are generated almost immediately, simply right-clicking on the part of the forecast that you want to forecast out in the future, and the system automatically creates that model and brings it back into your visualizations and or your data set automatically. So kind of behind the scenes, the AI forecasting and planning analytics is using time series based predictions. So behind the scenes, there's several different models that it goes through, but they are time series based. So it kind of assumes that you're forecasting across time. I think possibly future versions of this may expand that, but right now for the 10.15 release, that's what it's kind of built on. There's minimal data movement. So you can take your existing scenario or version of data that you've got, so your forecast that you're trying to populate, and you can bring in your statistical predictions directly into that same scenario. You're not having to create a different version to do that. And so it's not moving data back and forth between different tools, etc. Another thing is, it guides people through this operation. you don't need to be a data scientist now to create a predictive model in planning analytics. It's just, you simply right click and say you want to predict it. And it does analyze the multiple models, and it comes up with the highest probability prediction. And it brings that back, and it gives you a lot of information about that prediction and the assumptions that it's making in that prediction. And we'll see some of those data points here. So here is a typical forecast where we have January through April of 2020 actuals. And we're trying to forecast the unit revenue volume, for May through the end of the year for 2020. And with COVID-19 happening right now, we don't know, what it's going to look like. There's several different factors. We need to look at last year, but also there's some smoothing that we need to do based upon, March, April this year as well, and how that's going to impact the rest of the year. So to start off with, we're just going to select one of the products in our hierarchy to do a forecast on. So this user wanted to pick the 5G 32 gigabyte smartphone to do a prediction on. So all that you do is select that line in your Planning Analytics workspace or Planning Analytics for Excel front end, and you click Set Up Forecast. When you do that, the forecast comes up, and it says when you want to start the forecast and when you want to end the forecast. Here we're going from May 2020 through December 2021. When it generates that forecast, and again, it generates in seconds, it comes back and it shows you all of the actual data that it used, and then it shows you what the prediction is by time period, and it tells you what the confidence interval is, and then it'll tell you what the details are, and we'll see that here in a minute. And then over on the right-hand side, it tells you the accuracy. And so it's going to pick the highest accuracy out of all the models that it's going to go through to bring back. This is clicking on the statistical details button. So it tells you the different details associated with that prediction. And if you're a data scientist, I guess this means a whole lot. For a finance guy, I'm sure it's useful, but all that information is there in case somebody asks how it was derived. Okay. Also, when you arrow over any of these items in the detail section, it gives you an additional description of what it is, what the values are, and how it came up with those values. After you hit OK, it brings that model, that information back into your model, and it automatically adds the comments associated with that prediction. So when I right-click and look at the comments associated with that 5G 15 gigabyte phone, it tells me the statistical summary, what the input parameters were, what the predicted value was, and then who actually ran that model and when they ran it. Okay. Again, this is after we close the comments. It actually shows our actuals on the left and then our prediction off to the right and how it kind of trends. And again, it highlights it in a different color and it puts the dots indicating that it's a forecasted part of the model. Okay, so probably the biggest question that, for you planning analytics users out there that are asking is, how do I get this? Well, that's a good question. Actually, on October 15th, if you're a cloud customer, the administrator can select preview in Planning Analytics Workspace and actually change Planning Analytics Workspace, and I would assume doing this in development first, change the Planning Analytics Workspace front end to look at the new view. That would enable the AI forecasting, as well as all of the charting, dashboarding and reporting, and the new PAW front end would give you that preview. IBM is suggesting to go through any published books and or reports that you're using in the new preview mode and just make sure that everything is looking okay and functioning properly before you would actually go in and change the mode to the new Planning Analytics Workspace version. For on-premise customers, you would have to download and install the new PAW version after October 15th. Again, preferably in a development environment, and again, test anything that's been published out there and just make sure that things are working okay and showing visualizations correctly. Okay, this is what the workspace would look like from the cloud environment. So again, as the administrator, I'm logged in. I'm going to have this new button up here, Preview New Experience. If I click on it, it will actually change it over to the new UI. And then there will be a button up on the top that will actually say go back to old experience if you want to jump back to the old one again. One thing to note is for the cloud customers, once you select to officially migrate to the new UI, you can't go back. So I would suggest going through the previews, go test all of your reports and dashboards, etc. Make sure that everything is working before you hit that button and actually update and upgrade it. We will be doing a webinar shortly after this release. Actually comes out on October 15th. It will have some live demos in it. We'll be doing some testing as well. So be looking for that on, I believe we've got it scheduled for the beginning of November right now, but we're going to try to see if we can bump that up a little bit to get it out as soon, close to October 15th as we can. Okay, so following up that, we wanted to talk about a case study for planning analytics. And this is a customer that we've been working with for a little while now. This subject company is a worldwide manufacturer, and they distribute consumer and professional products. They have a huge supply chain network. They've got distribution and manufacturing plants across the world. So we're talking about multi-currencies, different time zones, etc. A large distribution network that we were dealing with. The business proposition was to create a unified planning, budgeting, and reporting system that helps automate and streamline, starting at the demand planning section for product, that going into production planning, ultimately into feeds financial planning, reporting, and ultimately customer profitability. So basically, what this company wanted to do was almost do a P&L by SKU, by ship to customer, to find out where they were making the most and least by product and by customer, with everything in their P&L allocated to the SKU and ship to. So taking all of the P&L lines and allocating them down to each sale. Okay, so a big task at hand. So first thing that we had to deal with was data integrity. There were a lot of issues with the data. Data was in silos, kind of across the organization. We had a Cognos environment that had some information, but a lot of the information was coming from Excel spreadsheets that people were kind of cobbling together. Basically, I had to get all of that into a data lake behind the scenes that we could then bring into planning analytics and kind of vet all that information and make sure that it was accurate and that everybody signed off on that it was accurate. The next kind of hurdle that we had to get across was the sheer data volume. So this company has got 33,000 SKUs, 60,000 customers, 3,000 cost centers, 3,000 days across multiple scenarios, multiple measures, etc. So as you can imagine, the size of these cubes are just enormous. And just trying to whittle those down as far as we could get to so we could get the performance that they were looking at. Ultimately, they gave us they wanted to wait at the most 10 seconds to get a customer profitability view where they do slicing and dicing on that customer profitability cube. So we kind of back into that. Another thing was the level of granularity and trying to figure out the right mix of things to bring into the cube versus to use another system like Cognos to look at detail, and pushing back on the client, to get that correct. You don't want to bring in too much detail in planning analytics because you're going to lose your performance pretty quickly. And so we kind of worked through that over the course of the project, and I think we got a good balance. Next thing was allocation rules. So we discovered that each P&L line item had a different allocation rule associated with it, different functionality, different logic, and trying to get all those correct for both actuals and a forecasted value was a daunting task, but we just took it line by line, and we eventually got there. The other thing that we had at hand was, the existing model was kind of cobbled together between a bunch of Excel templates that had custom formulas in it. They were basically an Excel hell when it came down to it. And then they had a lot of Cognos inputs too that they brought in through Excel using Cafe. But it was a very manual process. And when it came down to it, they couldn't get a customer profitability model out until about the 14th workday of the month. And that just was not working for them. They couldn't make real-time decisions using that, and they wanted to get that done a lot faster within the month. This is kind of an overview of the total business process. So we bring in the historical sales actuals by SKU, by product, by ship to customer, and by day. Our demand forecasters go in and they update their forecast by SKU and at the forecast customer level. So it's a level up from the ship to customer. And then the units and revenue are allocated down to the ship tos for forecast and budget. And that is sent over to the financial reporting cube and summary. So for total units, total revenue, et cetera. And then all the detail is sent over to our customer profitability model, which has got all the detail down by SKU and ship to. For forecast and budget, that is pushed over to financial reporting. And then actuals come from financial reporting and go into customer profitability. So there's a lot of moving pieces here and to the business process, and a lot of users involved with the model itself. The ultimate solution was the implementation of Planning Analytics Cloud. The users, for the most part, are using Planning Analytics Workspace and Planning Analytics for Excel, using templates and dashboards that we've created. A lot of Excel loads directly to Planning Analytics by the demand forecasters. The demand forecasting is entered at the SKU month forecast customer level. And then we do that spreading down. It's a Turbo Integrator process that we created to actually do that spreading automatically. It's calculated based on prior actuals and seasonality of the products. And then we gave them a lot of pricing flexibility. So the pricing model in Planning Analytics is based on month, SKU, where it's being distributed from, and the customer. And they can make those price changes either at a very high level or down at the SKU distribution point customer level, and then push those up. They also have the ability to drill down to a fine level detail on actuals and forecast in the customer profitability model, so they can actually see when things are allocated, how they were allocated, where they were allocated across the board. Right now, we're doing North America only. We're currently working with them to bring in the international data as well. The customer profitability cube, again, we do allocations of everything, SG&A cost, standard cost, rate analysis. We've got actuals, forecast, budgets, and then we do quarterly forecasts, snapshot those off into quarterly forecast versions, which then get brought over to financial reporting cube. In the financial reporting cube, we've got currency conversion. So right now, the finances for all the international locations are coming into the financial reporting cube, so they can do a consolidated financial report across all the organization and convert those into US dollars, euros, Mexican pesos, etc. We're doing that all in the cube. Just recently, we've added a lot of statistics into the model, and we've automated a lot of those statistics coming from various different data sources, including headcount, production statistics. And so the plants are actually looking at that every morning now in the financial reporting cube to see what their statistics were for the previous day. And for once, they've got a worldwide consolidation of all this information that's kind of automatic. So some lessons learned. One, split up the development in small pieces. Change management was huge. What we learned, we probably needed to bring in more of the people that were going to be involved in a day-to-day business with planning analytics up front and get buy-in that the model had correct data, that the format was correct. Data integrity, we talked about that a little bit. Then we used attributes to drive a lot of the back-end processes. And then Cadres Command Center was a huge lifesaver on this project as far as automating data movements, backups, etc. Okay. So real quick, we do have an offer. So we would be glad to spend up to 2 hours if you are interested in upgrading or moving to the cloud. We give you a 2-hour free consultation evaluating your existing either cloud environment to see if you're ready to upgrade to the new Planning Analytics version, or if you're on-premise, if you want to upgrade either on-premise or you want to go to cloud. We're offering a free 2-hour session for you guys. If you're interested, just email us at marketing@lpa.com and we'll follow up with you. All right, David, do we have any questions?
We've got a few. We'll try to cover quick because we're running a little bit short. So I guess one of the questions was on the AI portion, and is that an additional charge or is that just included as part of the planning analytics base product?
That is now included. It's actually using Watson Studio, I believe it is, behind the scenes, but there's no additional licensing cost for this release of the product. Just included.
All right, and then the other question real quick on perspectives, whether if you're migrating to the cloud, whether you can still use perspectives.
Perspectives could only be used by the administrators. Perspective uses a different interface than the cloud uses. So your users would actually have to migrate to Planning Analytics for Excel. So you'd want to bring up all those perspectives reports in packs and just make sure that they're performing correctly and that they're giving accurate results. But ultimately, your users are going to have to use packs instead of perspectives.
All right, so I think that's all the questions for now. I think we can move ahead.
Okay. So real quick, Don, you want me to cover this?
Sure. You can cover it or I can.
Okay. So real quick, where LPA can help on the planning analytics side, similar on the Cognos analytics side, we do upgrades and migrations, whether you want to go from on-premise to cloud, or you want to just upgrade on-premise. We do go live support. We do managed services work. So if you want us to come in and administer and do development work on your planning analytics environment. We've got staff augmentation projects that we can do. We do a lot of health checks. So basically taking your model and kind of looking behind the scenes and giving examples and suggestions on how to improve performance. And then
can you comment on the recent health check you did?
Yeah, so we did a health check in the last couple of weeks. One of the kind of key points that they were having is the server is taking 2.5 hours to restart. We got that down to 14 seconds to restart. And it was mainly tuning of rules and feeders behind the scenes that were just not efficient at all. So that's something that we did as part of 1 week engagement to do the health check and some remediation associated with that. And real quick, we do have that class that Don mentioned on Monday. If you are interested, if you can register today or tomorrow morning at the earliest. But that class is most of the day on Monday, the 21st. It's on Planning Analytics Developer Workshop. Planning Analytics Workspace Developer. So to kind of how to create cubes, maintain dimensions, create processes, etc. in Workspace. And that's it. Thank you for your time. And I will give the ball back to Dawn.